So we're almost at the end of 2025, and a lot of people claim that this year was actually a pretty good year for gaming, but that's something that's subjective and really depends on who you ask. But I don't know. I felt like this year was okay, and it was slightly better than 2024. I'll say that. Definitely better than 2022. I don't think it quite matched 2023 or anything like that, but I feel like 2025 was probably like one of the like decent years that we had gaming wise. And everybody knows about Expedition 33. That game won like 9 different awards at the Game Awards. It won awards for like different categories like best indie game, best narrative, best like debut, best art direction. Um, and the crazy thing about Claire Obscure Expedition 33 is that it's considered to be an indie game. It's not a AAA game or anything like that. And it's starting to make me wonder whether or not AAA gaming is starting to decline in popularity. And the reason I say that is because it seemed like a lot of these major video game corporations are either losing millions of dollars or people in general, mainly the gaming community, is boycotting like a lot of these major corporations, whether it be Nintendo, whether it be Activision, whether it be Square Enix, whether it be just about any like major like entity that makes some type of decision that people don't like. Hell, I could even say the same thing for Warner Brothers. They published, DC games and Mortal Kombat and stuff like that. I wouldn't say like people so much boycott Warner Brothers as much as they have Nintendo or Activision. It's just that they're losing millions on their games because they've been bad. People have not been into them. But one thing I've noticed within the past couple of years, probably since the start of the 2020s decade, is that RPGs are starting to become increasingly more popular than ever. And I feel like RPGs were starting to become popular like towards the late teens going into this decade. And I look at some of the major RPGs that have come out within the past couple of years. You look at games like Metaphor and Fantasio, Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring. You got Final Fantasy remake from 2020. You got Final Fantasy 16, which is actually a good game despite it not selling as much as it should have. You got Final Fantasy Rebirth, which didn't sell nearly as much as it should have. Um, we got the remake for Persona 3, which came out last year, I believe. Yeah, there's been like a lot of high profile RPG games that have been coming out, and I think it's to a point where, for the most part, the RPG genre has become one of the more popular genres within the gaming industry. And you look at like the games that won Game of the Year within the past couple of years. This year it was Expedition 33. In 2023 it was Baldur's Gate 3. In 2022 it was Elden Ring. Um, yeah, like it seemed like we have a lot of high profile RPGs that are out there that people um, like, even if they don't sell as much as they're supposed to, like, people love the inspiration that goes into them. They love the fact that RPGs, for the most part, feel like actual video games opposed to, like, just real life simulation and all that. And, I can say that one of the reasons why RPG has become so popular is because you look at some of the other genres, they've declined in popularity. Like, for example, the racing genre was really big back in the 2000s, and so far, like in this decade, it hasn't really been like as big. And when I mean this decade, I'm talking about the 2020s decade. What major racing game that you could think of that came out in 2025 that got mainstream attention aside from Mario Kart World? Hardly any. I know Forza is still a thing, but I don't know, like, I even feel like, the Forza Horizon series or the Forza, Motorsport, series is not as popular as it once was during the teens decade for the most part. And and I feel like with action adventure games, I feel like Sony does it the best with games like, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 and, God of War Ragnarok. Um, when it comes down to superhero related like action adventure games, obviously Sony does it the best. Nintendo just has a lot of profitable IPs that will sell well regardless because of the fact that they've been around since the 80s and the 90s and they're just making new entries to those. But even then, I feel like for the most part, Nintendo is still, I mean, their IPs are still popular, but a lot of people are fed up with the company and their antics. And this is something I've talked about in the past. And a lot of people feel like companies like Nintendo and Activision, they're more obsessed with I guess, putting out anything that is considered to be a money grab. Now, I can say like the quality from Nintendo games are really good because that's something that Nintendo always does well. But all the other controversies the corporation's been involved in is something that make them less likable to the public for the most part. And it seemed like with Activision, they just can't put out um, good games in relation to like Call of Duty anymore because a lot of people said Call of Duty Black Ops 7 was just awful. Probably one of the worst games that we've gotten within the series since the game from 2023. Probably one of the worst installments, ever for that matter. Um, and the crazy thing was Black Ops 6 felt like, I mean, I wouldn't say that game was necessarily great, but it felt like a step in the right direction in the sense that Activision was starting to they were starting to get it together, but then, they did Black Ops 7 and then I guess like using aesthetics that was inspired by Infinite Warfare and just having like a little bit of AI involved in like the creation of the game is something that turned a lot of people off. And then you look at games like Arc Raiders, you look at games like Battlefield 6. Um, a lot of people love those games, and you can see like by the sales, especially with Battlefield 6, I think it broke like a sales record within its first couple of weeks after it was in retail. But I don't know. I feel like the shooter genre of gaming is not nearly as popular as it was in the 2000s. I would say the 2000s and even like the first half of the teens to some extent was like a golden time period for the shooter genre of gaming. But I feel like now it's kind of hanging on by a thread because I think Call of Duty was like um, the main franchise that was considered the face of the shooter genre, and now it's fallen, so much to a point where I guess Battlefield is probably like the main like shooter genre like video game that's or franchise that people talk about and that people have like hope for in general. But yeah, as far as this current generation of gaming is concerned, I feel like RPGs for the most part is probably in its golden era because I don't remember RPGs ever being this popular in the 90s, the 2000s, or even the teens for that matter. And the thing is, I feel like Final Fantasy for the most part has fallen off. It's like Square Enix is still trying to milk, Final Fantasy VII for what it's worth through remakes and sequels and stuff like that, because nobody really cares about, Final Fantasy 16, even though it was considered to be a good game. But like, I don't know. I just feel like with Final Fantasy 16, making it rated M was just stupid because it's a game that's mostly been T rated. And if you do like an M rated game for just about anything, there has to be, blood, gore, excessive profanity. Um, there's like a certain formula you have to follow to make it work. And the thing is, historically speaking, Final Fantasy has mainly been T rated, which is why it probably didn't work. And I mean, at this point, I have no idea like what the audience for Final Fantasy is like supposed to be for that matter. Because I don't know, like I feel like Final Fantasy, like back in the day, was mainly for like kids and teenagers and stuff like that. But by making Final Fantasy 16 M rated, it's like, is this supposed to be for adults? Because I certainly didn't care about it, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't. A lot of people feel like Final Fantasy 15 from 2016 was overrated, but at the same time, it definitely got more mainstream attention in Final Fantasy 16 and sold more as well. But yeah, I honestly feel like for the most part, like RPGs have been like slowly growing in popularity since like the mid-teens. And I can say that especially with games like Final Fantasy 15, games like Persona 5, which also came out in 2016. Yeah, 2016 was also like a really good year for RPGs as well. And yeah, I feel like now we're at a point in time where RPGs are more likely to, I guess, become like major attractions in this day and age of gaming, especially like anything that's indie related. Like it seems like indie games are heavily favored over like AAA games nowadays because you look at the Game Awards. I mean, I don't think Nintendo hardly got any love at the Game Awards. And I think this is kind of like their way of boycotting, Nintendo and the fact that they shut down piracy sites and emulation and stuff like that. Activision definitely wasn't going to get any love because, screw them. um, Warner Brothers games might not be around the next couple of years because of obviously the whole Netflix deal and the thing with Paramount. One of those two companies is trying to buy out Warner Brothers. Um, Square Enix, I don't even know like where to start with Square Enix. It's just been they've been losing millions of dollars, been flop after flop with them. I don't even want to like really go into that or anything like that. Um, Sega, they still have a lot of like potential. They still put out like really good games in relation to like RPGs and stuff like that. And I don't know, I'm still waiting for the announcement of Persona 6 because I don't know, it's been almost a decade now and we haven't really like seen any trailers or heard any like updates or like learned about any potential like release dates for that game, but we do know it's definitely coming. But yeah, I have no idea what to think in relation to gaming nowadays. I feel like we're going to see a massive shift in terms of popularity with indie games because I feel like with AAA games, the companies that produce them, um, they just want to get inside people's wallet. They want to, for the most part, just do the bare minimum, get as much as they can, or just add bonus content to try and get as much out of consumers as much as they can. And like the big game that everybody's talking about next year is GTA 6. And honestly, it's not even promised that that's going to be released next year. They might delay it one more time just to piss us all off. But I digress. But yeah, I feel like we are currently living in the golden era of RPGs. I feel like RPGs are definitely going to become more mainstream within the next couple of years or so. I'm not sure if AAA video game developers, I don't know if they can still, put out like high profile, high quality RPGs like some of the games that I named not too long ago, some of the older RPGs that came out in the past. Um, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like you look at Baldur's Gate 3, the reason why that was a big deal when it came out is because it was a sequel to Baldur's Gate 2, which came out back in the 2000s. So I feel like like that was one of the reasons why. And the crazy thing is, there was a lot of big games that came out in 2023, and that one game stood out the most. And it's not everybody's cup of tea, but when it comes down to making sequels of games that have um, that have had franchises that have been inactive for like longer than a decade, then most likely the anticipation is going to be high. And by the time it comes out, people are going to be more likely to buy it. You look at Metaphor and Fantasio. Um, that's a game that kind of drew inspiration from like Persona 5, or at least that's what it looked like to me. And I feel like um Claire Obscure Expedition 33 drew inspiration from both Final Fantasy and Persona to some extent, which is a good thing. It's good that new games are drawing inspiration from older games, even if they are, indie games. And I feel like indie game developers nowadays are considered to be underdogs, which is why they get more support than, more established video game developers and companies that have been around forever. So I don't know. This might just be the new direction of gaming. But yeah, like I just feel like it's one of those deals where it feels like everything is backwards, because I feel like um the more like established, developers that have been around forever that are big corporations, they should be the trendsetters for the indie game developers, not the other way around. But I don't know. I just feel like everything in this world post COVID has been backwards. Nothing has been the same, and there's a lot of people who want answers as to why that's the case. But but yeah, I mean, I feel like if this trend continues, then we can eventually see the downfall of AAA video game developers, because they're going to continue losing millions and millions of dollars. They're going to end up going bankrupt, or they're going to end up merging with another company or getting bought out or what have you. Because it seems like, after COVID, it seemed like all these like buyouts have been happening. I think Microsoft acquired Activision, Sony bought out Bungie, Saudi Arabia bought out Electronic Arts, and we have no idea what the fate of Warner Brothers Games is going to be. So yeah, I mean, I feel like indie game developers are going to become more and more popular as the decade continues.